So we're going to expand on our concept of the if structure by adding an optional else on the end of it. And it will look something like this. We have our normal if statement with a condition, and we're going to tack on an optional else statement. I want you to notice the else does not have a condition, because when the if runs, it executes the logic inside of the if, and then it drops to the bottom of the entire structure. But when the if does not run, it drops into the else automatically, so the else does not need a condition. All right, so let's try this out. So I'm going to write a program that is going to prompt the user for a number and tell them if the number is too large. In order to do that, I'm going to need a variable to put their number in, and I'm going to need a scanner, and then I should probably also import the scanner. So I'm going to do that, and the next thing I'm going to do is prompt them for a number between 1 and 100. Once I have their number in my variable called num, the next thing I'm going to do is build a standard if statement that says if their number is larger than 100, then they have given me an invalid value. So I'm going to tell them their number is larger than 100. But if their number is not larger than 100, I might want to tell them that the number is not too large. So I'm going to use an if statement to do that. Excuse me, I'm going to use an else statement to do that. And I'm going to print inside of here, if their number is not larger than 100, the else will automatically run. So I'm going to put a print statement in here telling them that their number is not too large. So we'll see that I have created two buckets, an if bucket and an else bucket. One of the two will execute. When the if does not run, the else automatically runs. That's why I don't need a condition on it. All right, so let's test this and see what happens. The idea is that if I get a number from 1 to 100, I'm going to have one of two buckets. Either it is too large or it is not too large. So if I put in a number 125, that is definitely going to say my number is larger than 100. So if I put in something that is not larger than 100, like 25, it's going to tell me my number is not too large. I'm going to add one more test case in here, like a minus 25. That is a negative number. And it is telling me that my number is not too large, but unfortunately, I asked the user for a number between 1 and 100. And so I'm going to add another if statement here that sees if I can tell whether or not the user has given me a number between 1 and 100. So now I'm going to build an if statement checking to see if their number is less than 100 and simultaneously greater than 1. I'm going to put the equal sign on both of those conditions so that we can capture the boundary values in this particular bucket. And if they do give me a number between 1 and 100, I want to mirror back the number to them and tell them that it is a good number. So I'm going to add print statements that says you entered 25. That is a valid number. But what if they don't give me a number between 1 and 100? I'm going to use my default else that doesn't require any kind of a condition in order to tell them that they did not give me a valid number. I'm going to mirror back the number that they did give me when I give them that error message. So my else statement is going to tell them their number, and it's going to give them an error message. So let's test this one and let's see what we get. So now when I compile it and I run it, I would expect it, I have two standalone if statements, two standalone if else. So if I give them a valid number, it should execute my first if statement and then drop to the end of that if else structure, and then it will evaluate my second one. So the first time it's going to tell me my number is not too large. That was my first if statement. The second time it is going to tell them the number that they entered and that it's a valid number. It looks like I need to do a little bit of user interface maintenance here. So I'm going to change my print statements to print lines so that I can force a couple of lines between each one of the individual input. So I'm going to change all of my systemout.prints to systemout.print lines. I'm going to run it one more time just to see if I have a prettier user interface this time. All right, enter a number from 1 to 100. If I enter 25, it is going to tell me my number is not too large, and then it's going to drop into my second if else and tell them, mirror back their number. So what if I put in a number that is too large, like 125? The first one is going to tell me that it's invalid, and then my second if statement is also going to tell them that it is invalid because I ran the else on both of them. The nice thing is that if I put in a number that is too small, my first if is just going to tell them that it's not too large, but my second if, because I have a compound condition, is going to tell them, it'll execute the else statement and tell them that the input is valid. So let's try one more. This time we're going to ask the user for their name, and we're going to see if their name starts with John Jacob, as in the song John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. So I'm going to create a string variable to put their name in. I'm going to prompt them for their name, and I'm going to capture it in that variable. So now that I have their name, and I'm going to use next line just to make sure if I capture the entire line of text and not just a single word. Now I'm going to build an if statement to see if their name is John Jacob. I can't use the dual equal signs with name because name is a string variable, and there's a different way that we do comparisons with string variables, remember? So I'm going to say name equals, and then I'm going to use equals ignore case, just in case they put it as uppercase or lowercase. Whatever I put inside of these equal signs is what it will compare it to, or excuse me, the parentheses. And I want to compare it to John Jacob, regardless of the case that they enter. And I'm going to tell them if their name equals John Jacobs, I'm going to say, hey, that sounds a lot like that song. I'm going to add a default else statement on the end here. And if their name does not begin with or does not equal John Jacob, then I'm going to tell them they have a very nice name. And I will mirror back to them the name that they gave me. All right, so let's test this and see how it works. So when I run this to test, you're going to notice that it never even stopped and allowed me the chance to enter the name. And the reason is because we have a next line read here that is following this other type of read here, which I believe was a next int. And we're going to find out that next lines do not like to follow other type of reads besides next lines, because all of the other types of read leaves the enter key in the input stream. And we're going to find out that the next line read actually consumes enter keys. And since my next int left the enter key in there, and this next line read saw that enter key and consumed it, it thinks that it got the answer. So what we're going to have to do is reset my scanner in order to clear out that input stream and any of the enter keys that might be left in there. The best way that I can use to reset my scanner is the same way that I created it in the first place. I don't have to redeclare it, so I don't need the data type scanner. I'm just going to copy where I created it and initialized it. And I'm going to paste it right down here, right before I do my next line read. And I'm going to say that I have to reset my scanner. I only need to reset the scanner if ever I do next line reads after any other type of reads, like next int, next double, next float, even next. So let's run it again and see if it will wait for my answer this time. There it is. Now it's waiting for an answer. So if I say John Jacob, it should drop into my if statement. If I run it again, now it's still going to wait for my answer. And if I put in anything else that is not John Jacob, it will tell me that they have a very nice name, and it will mirror the name back. So what if I wanted to say that their name was not something? How would I say not on this function that allows me to compare string values? Well, let me see if we can do another independent if statement that says if your name is not Tiny Tim, you must have had a good Christmas. All right, so I have my if statement that says if your name equals ignore case Tiny Tim. Once again, we're going to ignore case regardless of what my user keys in, but I want to say if it's not Tiny Tim. Well, I'm used to putting a not symbol besides my logic operator, and this one doesn't have a logic operator. I can't put the not sign in front of tiny, and I can't put the not sign in front of equals, so I'm going to put the not symbol, which is the exclamation point, in front of the entire sentence. And if their name is not Tiny Tim, I'm going to say something like, I hope you had a nice Christmas. And then I'm going to add my default else on the end. And what should we say to Tiny Tim? Should we say something like Scrooge is not so bad after all? Maybe Scrooge is a terrible man who has a change of heart. Let's decide what we'd like to say to Tiny Tim. So I'm going to tell him that Scrooge is going to have a change of heart. I'm going to change all of these prints to print line, just so I don't mess up my user interface. And then we're going to run it and see if we can get something to happen when the name is not Tiny Tim. All right, so let's test it. I need to put a number to drop through those first series of if-else, and this is a name. If I say that the name is Tiny Tim, it is going to evaluate it in the first if-else, and since it does not equal John Jacob, it's going to tell me that it's very nice, and then when it hits the second if-else statement, Tiny Tim, it's going to drop past the if statement and it's going to execute the else. Scrooge is going to have a change of heart. And the way that I can get into the if statement for the name not equal to Tiny Tim is to, well, enter a name that is not Tiny Tim, such as Henry. So Henry is going to drop into the else statement of my first if else, and then it is also going to drop into the if on my second if else.